What's up, everyone? On the chess subreddit yesterday, there was a topic about Hikaru discussing the bishop pair and its value for players who are less than master level. And I thought that was pretty interesting because I actually did an analysis a couple months ago trying to quantify the value of the bishop pair as well as looking at knights against bishops and is one better than the other in isolation. So yeah, this was the Reddit post, why does Hikaru believe that the bishop pair is irrelevant, on one of his recent streams. Hikaru said the bishop pair does not apply to any level below, I would say, international master, maybe master level perhaps. It's something which is going to be irrelevant to 99.9%, of people who watch this video, so I wouldn't worry about it. And I actually had one of the first posts here talking about the analysis I did. First, I'm going to take a quick look at the article, which is on the Nova Chess website, Bishops versus Knights. I've got a few other articles that might be interesting. I'm going to focus really on the quantitative analysis that I did here. So what I did is I looked at hundreds of thousands of games, and then I had to identify which of those had a position that was only a bishop against only a knight, and then the rest of the material was equal, as well as positions where one side had the bishop pair and the other side had a bishop and knight or two knights, and all the other material was equal. That way we can control, and I made sure it was the case for at least 2 or 3 ply. That way it wouldn't just be like someone was up a pawn, but they were briefly even material. So I think this is a pretty good methodology to evaluate based on the actual outcomes of games, whether the bishop pair has an advantage. If you want to know more details, you can check out the article. But what I was able to discover is that the bishop versus knight matchup was pretty even. You can see in the graph here, the knight is the orange bar, bishop is the green bar. At more levels than not, including at the master level, which I have a very large sample size of, the knight actually slightly outperformed the bishop in terms of the score. So if you're, winning slightly over half your games or winning more than you're drawing or winning more than you're losing, you'll have a score over 50%. And the knight tended to score above 50%. It wasn't consistent the whole way, but the ones where the bishop scored higher weren't significant. Again, it's not a big difference. I think in general you should focus more on the position rather than the intrinsic value of a bishop or knight. But it was also, I think, in contrast to some earlier suggestions that bishops were actually more valuable than knights. I think Bobby Fischer, I've got it in the article here, but International Master Larry Kaufman conducted an extensive database analysis and concluded that unpaired bishops and knights are equal within 1/50th of a pawn, essentially a negligible difference. He valued both at approximately 3.25. So, what I found is pretty consistent with what he said. Other people have given different values for bishops and knights. I think Bobby Fischer valued bishops more than knights. I can't remember the exact number he put. But really, it's going to depend a lot on the position. Bishops generally do better in open boards, knights in closed positions, obviously in blitz. It might be nice to have a knight because you can fort people and they're not paying attention. I probably have a slight preference for knights over bishops, more the types of positions I play, although I do like open positions. But I'm not someone who really gets too concerned in a online blitz game if someone's going to take my bishop with their knight. I'm usually happy to play those. It also might depend somewhat on your style, what you feel comfortable with. So moving on to the bishop pair performance. So this is when you have 2 bishops against a bishop and knight or 2 knights. Here you can look at the graph. There's a clear advantage for the bishop pair, and this is on pretty large sample sizes. You can see here the number of games, 960 games at the 500 level. The others are well in the thousands. Look at the master, 2,400 plus, scoring 54%. And even at 1,000 or 1,500, we've got a statistically significant advantage to the bishop pair. And you can actually take the win probability versus ELO formula and convert the score into an advantage. So this is saying the bishop pair adds 18 centipawns or 28 centipawns. So that's, a non-negligible difference, I would say. So just to respond to what Hikaru said, I think that there is certainly an advantage of the bishop pair. Now, in online blitz games, there's a lot of other factors. So having, a 0.2 pawn advantage is not going to manifest itself in a win. That often when there's other things going on, especially for someone at Hikaru's level, they're making way fewer blunders than us. But if someone's rated 1200, there's probably a lot of other things you're going to be doing wrong in the game. So that having the bishop pair is less likely to be sort of the dispositive factor that wins you games. But we can see over a large sample size that having the bishop pair does lead to consistently better results as opposed to being the side without the bishop pair. So I do think that, the bishop pair is something you should often strive for if it's a position that makes sense. Obviously, if it's a locked, closed board, it may not be advantageous, but generally positions will open up. And if you retain the bishop pair into the endgame, you will more likely than not have an easier time and potentially be able to convert into a winning advantage if everything else is equal. I think that's the key because, when I play blitz games, I'm usually, me and my opponents usually blunder something a lot larger than, half a pawn advantage somewhere earlier on. But I do think that especially for more serious, classical or rapid games, thinking about how you can get the bishop pair and then maximize it, not only have it, but, how do you convert it? How do you play on both sides of the board? Open up lines for attack or to create threats, I think is really important. So, I'll drop a link to the article in the description, but that's, I think, something I just wanted to share because I thought this post from yesterday was really relevant to the analysis I had done.